What would you do if you saw the last member of an extinct species being sold for the price of a meal? Would you walk away, or would you risk everything to save someone the galaxy had forgotten? This is the story of a human who chose compassion over common sense and how that choice changed everything. The air in the Nexus trading hub reeked of desperation and broken dreams. Flickering neon lights cast sickly shadows across a crowd that had gathered for one reason: to buy whatever scraps of sentient life the galaxy had to offer. And there she stood, Kaela, chained to a rusted auction platform like discarded cargo. Her blue-tinged skin bore the telltale marks of her people, the Aetherians. Once they'd been known across the galaxy for their gift of telepathy, their ability to touch minds and share thoughts across vast distances. Now she was the last echo of a dead civilization standing in shackles while strangers decided her worth. The auctioneer's voice crackled through a failing speaker system. Lot 47, Aetherian female, approximately 22 standard years. No special training, no warranties. Bidding starts at 50 credits. 50 credits, the price of a decent meal. Kaela kept her eyes fixed on the floor, trying to make herself invisible. She'd learned that eye contact only invited cruelty. Her wrists were raw from the energy shackles, her stomach hollow from days without proper food. Dare me. This was her reality now. Had been for 3 years since the raiders found her scavenging through the ruins of her homeworld. 50 credits going once. The auctioneer drawled his tone, suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. The crowd was losing interest. A few half-hearted gestures, some muttered conversations about better prospects in the next lot. Kaela felt something die inside her chest. Even as a slave, she wasn't worth wanting. Going twice. That's when the voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Clear, calm, absolutely certain. 2,000. The entire hall went silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the auctioneer's jaw dropped. 2,000 credits. For her. The worthless remnant of a forgotten species. Kaela's head snapped up, searching the crowd until her eyes found him. A human male, maybe in his 30s, wearing a worn leather jacket that had seen better decades. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray, and his eyes held the kind of weariness that came from seeing too much of the galaxy's darkness. But those same eyes were fixed on her with something she hadn't seen in years. Something that looked almost like respect. The auctioneer stammered, Did you say 2,000? You heard me. The human's voice carried the slight drawl of the Outer Rim colonies, but there was steel underneath it. 2,000 credits, final offer. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. 2,000 credits could buy you a decent speeder or passage to 3 different star systems. What kind of madman would waste it on damaged goods? Sold. The auctioneer's greed overrode his confusion. Lot 47 to the gentleman in the back. As the energy shackles released with a soft hiss, Kaela felt her legs nearly give out. 3 years of captivity, of being treated like livestock, and now this stranger had just paid more for her than anyone had ever suggested she was worth. The human approached the platform with measured steps. Up close, she could see the scars along his knuckles, the way his hand rested casually near what was obviously a concealed weapon. This was a man who'd seen combat. Real combat. Can you walk? His voice was surprisingly gentle. Kaela nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her voice had been the first thing they'd tried to break back when she'd still had the strength to scream. Good, we're leaving. Now. He didn't grab her arm or drag her along like property. Instead, he simply turned and started walking toward the exit, clearly expecting her to follow. For the first time in years, someone was giving her a choice. Kaela took a shaky step forward, then another. Her bare feet against the cold metal flooring felt like the first steps towards something she couldn't yet name. As they passed through the crowd, she caught fragments of whispered conversations. Crazy human. What's he planning to do with her? Probably gonna sell her parts. But the man beside her seemed utterly unbothered by the speculation. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd stopped caring what strangers thought a long time ago. They reached the docking bay, and Kaela got her first look at his ship. It was a modified gunship, maybe 40 meters long, with armor plating that had been welded and rewelded so many times it looked like metal scar tissue. Scorch marks from old battles decorated the hull like war paint. The name Valkyrian was etched into the nose in letters that had been burned rather than painted. "Home sweet home," the human said, and for the first time, Kaela detected the faintest hint of dry humor in his voice. As the airlock cycled open, a new voice emerged from hidden speakers. Crisp, artificial, but somehow more alive than most organics she'd encountered. "Riven, I trust you have a reasonable explanation for spending our fuel money on biological accessories." The human Riven smirked. "Z3 and meet our new crew member." "Try to be nice." "Crew member." The AI's tone suggested this was the most ridiculous thing it had heard all cycle. "Riven, she's property, legally purchased property, but property nonetheless." "Not anymore," Riven said, simply gesturing for Kaela to board. "Nobody's property on my ship." As she stepped across the threshold, Kaela felt something shift inside her chest. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't being dragged somewhere against her will. She was being invited. The airlock sealed behind them with a soft pneumatic hiss, cutting off the sounds of the trading hub forever. Whatever happened next, whatever this human wanted from her, at least she was no longer standing on that platform waiting to be sold for the price of a meal. Riven was already heading deeper into the ship, his boots echoing against the metal deck plates. "Z3 and prep for departure, and find our guests some real food." "Our guest," the AI repeated, its tone dripping with skeptical emphasis. "How wonderfully optimistic of you." But even as the artificial intelligence grumbled, Kaela could hear the subtle sounds of the ship coming to life around her. Environmental systems humming, engines warming up, the gentle vibration of a vessel preparing to leave port. She was going somewhere. After 3 years of going nowhere, she was finally moving again. And for the first time since the raiders had found her in the ruins of her homeworld, Kaela allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger had bought her for something other than suffering. The question was, what did a human mercenary want with the last surviving member of a dead telepathic species? She was about to find out. The first thing that hit her was the smell. Not the stench of unwashed bodies and fear that had filled the trading hub, but something clean. Metal polish, recycled air that actually worked, and underneath it all, the faint aroma of real coffee. When was the last time she'd smelled real coffee? Kaela followed Riven deeper into the Valkyrian, her bare feet silent against demanding plates that were worn smooth but impeccably maintained. Everything around her spoke of a ship that was loved despite its battle scars, or maybe because of them. "Z3 end status report," Riven called out as they passed through what looked like a common area. Mismatched furniture, but everything bolted down with military precision. "Departure clearance granted. Fuel at 87%. Cargo bay is secure." The AI's voice seemed to follow them through the corridor. "And I've located what passes for nutrition bars and storage. I assume our acquisition hasn't eaten recently." Kaela's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly enough to echo off the bulkheads. She pressed a hand to her midsection, embarrassed. Riven glanced back at her. "When did you last eat real food, I mean? Not whatever scraps they were throwing at you." She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. Her voice felt rusty from disuse. When she finally spoke, the words came out as barely more than a whisper. 4 days, maybe 5. Something dark flickered across Riven's expression. "Z3N, scratch the nutrition bars. Heat up some of that stew from the freezer. The good stuff." "The good stuff?" The AI sounded genuinely surprised. "Riven, that's military-grade combat rations. The kind that actually taste like food. Are you certain?" "She's crew now. Crew eats well." Crew, there was that word again. Kaela still couldn't quite believe it. 3 hours ago, she'd been livestock. Now this strange human was calling her crew and offering her military rations that probably cost more than she'd been sold for originally. Riven led her to what was obviously the mess hall. A small table surrounded by benches, all of it built to withstand the kind of turbulence that came from running blockades or dodging pirates. He gestured to one of the seats. "Sit, eat. We'll talk after you've got some food in you." Kaela perched on the edge of the bench, ready to bolt if this turned out to be some elaborate setup. In her experience, kindness always came with a price, usually one she couldn't afford to pay. The food arrived via a small service hatch. Real meat, actual vegetables, steam rising from a bowl that looked like it could feed 3 people. Her hands shook as she picked up the spoon. The first bite nearly made her cry. She'd forgotten that food could have flavor. Real flavor, not just the bland paste that kept slaves alive, but never satisfied. This tasted like home cooking, like someone had cared enough to season it properly. Riven watched her eat without comment, his own hands wrapped around a mug of that coffee she'd smelled earlier. Finally, after she'd managed to clear half the bowl, he spoke. "I'm guessing you weren't always a slave." Kaela looked up from her food, suddenly wary. "What makes you say that? The way you hold yourself. Even scared, even starved, you've got backbone. Slaves born into it don't carry themselves like that. Something happened to you." She set down her spoon, and appetite suddenly gone. "Does it matter?" "Maybe. Depends on what you want to do next." Next. The concept felt foreign. For 3 years, there had been no next. Just survival one day at a time. "You're not property anymore, Kaela. That means you get to choose. You can ask me to drop you off at the next civilized planet with enough credits to start over. Or," he paused, studying her face, "you can stay, learn to be useful. Become part of something." Part of what? Riven gestured around them, encompassing the ship. "This. We're not exactly a traditional crew, it's just me, Z3N, and now maybe you. We take jobs that other people won't touch. Rescue missions in hostile territory. Cargo runs through pirate space. The kind of work that pays well because it's dangerous as hell. And you think I could be useful for that?" Kaela couldn't keep the disbelief out of her voice. "I'm broken. I'm weak. You're the last of the Aetherians." Riven's interruption was gentle but firm. "Do you think I spent 2,000 credits on you because I needed another mouth to feed?" The words hit her like a physical blow. He knew. Somehow this human mercenary knew exactly what she was, what her people had been. "My telepathy is gone," she said quickly. The raiders, they use neural scramblers. Whatever I used to be able to do, I can't anymore. I'm just ordinary now." Z3N run a full biometric scan. Neural activity, brainwave, patterns, the works. "Scanning," the AI replied, and Kaela felt a subtle tingling sensation like static electricity dancing across her skin. After a moment, Z3N continued. "Interesting. Neural pathways show evidence of forced dormancy, not destruction. It's as if someone built walls in her mind, rather than burning down the house." Riven leaned forward. "Walls can be torn down." "You don't understand," Kaela said, panic rising in her voice. "I tried. For 3 years, I tried to reach out, to touch another mind, to prove I was still me. Nothing. There's nothing left." "Maybe you were trying too hard," Riven suggested. "Or maybe you were trying alone." Before she could ask what he meant, the ship shuddered slightly. Not damage, just the gentle lurch of a vessel transitioning from atmospheric flight to open space. "Departure successful," Z3N announced. "We are now en route to Bastion Outpost. Estimated travel time 4 days?" 4 days. Now, Kaela felt something loosen in her chest. 4 days where nobody could find her, claim her, or put her back in chains. 4 days to figure out what came next. "There's a spare cabin next to the engine room," Riven said, standing and clearing away her empty bowl. "Nothing fancy, but it's private. Has a real bed and everything." A private room with a bed. Kaela blinked back tears she didn't want to shed in front of this stranger who kept being kinder than she knew how to handle. "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Why buy me? Why help me? What do you get out of this?" Riven paused in the doorway, his back to her. For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Because 3 years ago, I was where you are now. Different circumstances, but same feeling. Like the universe had decided I wasn't worth saving." He turned to face her. "Someone gave me a second chance. Maybe it's time I pass that forward." He left her alone with that revelation, his footsteps fading as he headed toward what she assumed was the bridge. Kaela sat in the mess hall, surrounded by the gentle hum of a ship that was carrying her away from everything she'd known. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of where she was going. She was curious. "Z3N," she called out tentatively. "Yes, Kaela. That scan you ran, do you really think my telepathy could come back?" There was a pause longer than necessary for an AI to process the question. I think Z3N said finally that the human brain is far more resilient than most people believe, and Aetherian brains are even more so. Is that a yeah? That's a we'll find out together. Kaela smiled. It felt strange on her face, like flexing a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. But it felt good too. Maybe Riven was right. Maybe walls could be torn down. Maybe she could become something more than just a survivor. As the Valkyrian carried her toward an uncertain future, Kaela allowed herself to believe that perhaps for the first time in 3 years tomorrow might be better than today. The question was, what would she discover about herself when those walls finally came down? Kaela woke to the sound of metal striking metal. Sharp, rhythmic impacts that echoed through the ship's corridors like a mechanical heartbeat. She'd slept for 14 hours straight, the first real sleep she'd had in years, not the fitful dozing of someone who expected to be hurt at any moment. The bed in her new quarters was nothing fancy, just a standard crew bunk, but it might as well have been a luxury suite compared to the cold deck plates she'd grown accustomed to. The metallic sounds continued drawing her curiosity. She'd never been allowed to explore freely before. The concept of walking around without permission felt almost rebellious. Following the noise led her to a section of the ship she hadn't seen yet, the training bay, and there was Riven stripped to the waist, his skin gleaming with sweat as he worked through combat forms with a practice blade. Kaela froze in the doorway. The scars she'd glimpsed before were fully visible now. Laser burns, blade cuts, what looked like shrapnel marks across his left shoulder. This wasn't someone who'd learned to fight in a gym. This was someone who'd survived wars. The practice blade moved like liquid mercury in his hands. Each strike was precise, controlled, deadly. He wasn't just exercising. He was maintaining skills that had obviously kept him alive through situations most people wouldn't survive. "You can come in," he said without stopping his routine. "I know you're there." Heat flushed her cheeks. She'd thought she was being quiet. I didn't want it to interrupt. "You're not." Riven completed his current sequence and lowered the blade. "Actually, this works out. I was going to ask if you wanted to learn a few things." "Learn what?" "How to not die." His tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes were serious. "Kaela, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I can guarantee that sooner or later someone's going to try to hurt you. Or me. Or both of us. When that happens, I'd rather you had options besides hiding." She looked at the practice weapons mounted on the wall. They looked heavy, complicated. "I've never fought anyone before." "Not really." "That's not true." Riven set down his blade and faced her. "You survived 3 years as a slave. That took fighting. Maybe not with weapons, but with something more important." "What will?" "The refusal to give up." He gestured to the weapon rack. "Pick something. Anything that feels right in your hands." Kaela approached the weapons slowly. Most of them looked like they could cut her in half if she handled them wrong. But there near the end was something that didn't seem quite as intimidating. A curved blade shorter than the others with a grip that seemed sized for smaller hands. She lifted it carefully. It was lighter than she'd expected, but still substantial enough to feel real. "Good choice," Riven said. "That's a traditional Aetherian combat blade. I picked it up from a collector a few years back." The words hit her like a physical blow. "This belonged to my people." "Your people were warriors, Kaela, not just telepaths. The two often went together." He picked up his own practice weapon. "They believed that true strength came from harmony between mind and body. Maybe it's time you remembered that." He moved toward her slowly, his blade held in a non-threatening position. "First lesson, defense. I'm going to attack you very slowly. I want you to try to stop me." "Riven, I don't think..." "Trust me." He stepped forward, his blade moving in a gentle arc toward her shoulder. Instinct kicked in before thought could interfere. Kaela brought her own weapon up, deflecting his strike with a move she didn't remember learning. Both of them froze. "Do that again," Riven said quietly. This time his attack came from a different angle. Again, her body responded without conscious direction. The blade moved in her hands like it belonged there, finding the right position to turn aside his strike. "Interesting," came Z3N's voice from the overhead speakers. "Neural activity is spiking. Motor cortex showing unusual patterns." "Muscle memory," Riven murmured, but his eyes held something like wonder. Your people didn't just teach this stuff. They bred it into you, passed it down through generations. He attacked again, faster this time. Kaela's blade met his with a ring of metal that echoed through the bay. But this time, instead of just defending, she found herself pressing forward, forcing him to give ground. For just a moment, she felt something stir in the back of her mind. A whisper of connection, like hearing voices in another room. Then Riven's blade twisted around hers with practiced ease, and suddenly she was disarmed, the weapon flying across the room to clatter against the far bulkhead. "Not bad," he said, breathing only slightly harder. "But you're fighting like someone who expects to lose." Kaela rubbed her wrist where the vibration had stung. "What do you mean? You're reactive, defensive, always waiting for the other person to make the first move." He retrieved her blade and handed it back. "Sometimes survival means going on the attack." "I'm not a killer. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to be someone who chooses when to fight instead of just hoping the fight doesn't come to you." They went at it again. This time Riven was less gentle. His strikes came faster, forcing her to react more quickly. And gradually something began to change in how she moved. Instead of just blocking, she started looking for openings. Instead of backing away, she began to press forward when she saw opportunity. The blade felt more natural in her hands with each exchange. "Better," Riven said after disarming her for the third time. "You're starting to think like a fighter instead of a victim." During their fourth bout, it happened again. That whisper in the back of her mind stronger this time. For just an instant, she could sense where Riven's next attack was coming from. Not from watching his body language, but from something deeper. Something that felt almost like, "Did you just—" Riven stopped mid-strike, staring at her. "What? You moved to block before I even started my attack." Kaela blinked. Had she? The movement had felt natural, like she'd known it was coming. I don't know." "Z3N, run another scan. Focus on the telepathic centers." "Already scanning," the AI replied. "This is remarkable. The neural pathways that were dormant yesterday are showing activity, faint but definitely present." A chill ran down Kaela's spine. "It's coming back." Something is Aetherian confirmed. The physical exertion seems to be triggering neural responses that weren't there before, as if the connection between mind and body is reactivating dormant systems. Riven lowered his weapon, his expression thoughtful. "Your people really did link everything together, didn't they? Combat, telepathy, physical conditioning. It's all one system." "I felt it," Kaela whispered. "Just for a second, I could sense what you were going to do." "How does it feel, the connection coming back?" She considered the question. For 3 years, the absence of her telepathy had felt like a missing limb, a constant ache that reminded her of everything she'd lost. But this felt different. Not like something returning, but like something new being born. "Scary," she admitted, "but also right, like I'm remembering how to be myself." Riven nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll take it slow. No pushing, no forcing. Just training, and we'll see what happens naturally." "What if it doesn't come back completely? What if I'm never what I used to be?" "Then you'll be something new. Something that combines who you were with who you're becoming." He smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. "Might be even better than what you were before." As they cleaned up the training bay, Kaela found herself looking forward to tomorrow's session. Not just because her abilities might be returning, but because she was starting to remember what it felt like to be strong. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't just surviving, she was growing. But as the Valkyrian continued its journey through space, none of them knew that their ship's energy signature was being tracked, that someone had noticed the unusual telepathic readings coming from their vessel. Someone who had very specific plans for the last surviving Aetherian. Someone who was already plotting an intercept course. The alarm started screaming at 0347 ship time. Kaela bolted upright in her bunk, heart hammering, as red emergency lights bathed her quarters in hellish crimson. For a terrifying moment, she was back in the slave pens, listening to the sounds of another selection beginning. Then Riven's voice cut through the chaos over the comm system, calm and deadly. "All hands to stations. We've got company, and they're not here to chat." She stumbled into the corridor still wearing the sleep clothes that Z3N had fabricated for Neptune. The ship was moving differently now, no longer the smooth cruise they had maintained for the past 2 days. This was evasive maneuvering, the kind that made your stomach drop and your inner ear scream protests. The bridge was a symphony of controlled chaos when she arrived. Riven's hands flew over the pilot controls while holographic displays showed tactical information in 3 dimensions around his head. Z3N's avatar's shifting geometric pattern hovered over the main console. "Report!" Riven barked without looking away from his instruments. "Single vessel modified heavy cruiser approaching from the asteroid field." Z3N replied with mechanical precision. "They've been shadowing us for at least 6 hours using the rocks to mask their signature. Pirates, worse, slavers, and they're broadcasting on our personal frequency." Kaela felt ice form in her veins. Personal frequency. Riven's jaw tightened. Someone gave them our comm codes. Z3N put them through. The voice that filled the bridge was oily familiar and made Kaela's skin crawl. Well, if it isn't the famous Captain Cross and his bleeding heart rescue operations. She knew that voice. Vex Kane, the slaver captain, who'd processed her when she was first captured. The man who'd personally overseen her neural conditioning, who'd smiled while they burned walls into her mind. "Kane, nerd." Riven's voice carried enough venom to poison a small planet. "Still kidnapping children for profit, I see." Now, Captain, let's not get personal. I'm simply here to reclaim stolen property. You see that little blue-skinned toy you picked up on Nexus Station? She was sold under false pretenses. Kaela gripped the edge of a console so hard her knuckles went white. "He's lying. I saw the bill of him." "Oh, sweet Echo. Blood!" Kane's voice took on a mockingly affectionate tone and Kaela's world tilted. "Did you think we didn't know what you really are, the last pure strain Aetherian telepath in the galaxy, my dear? You're worth more than this entire ship." Echo blood, the old slaver term for Aetherians with intact telepathic abilities. But how could he know her powers had been dormant for years? "Z3N," Riven said quietly. "How long until they're in weapons range?" 4 minutes, 30 seconds. "Can we outrun them?" "Negative. They've upgraded their engines since our last encounter. They'll overtake us in 6 minutes regardless of our acceleration." Riven turned to look at Kaela for the first time since the alarm started. "How much do you trust me?" The question was so unexpected that she almost laughed. "With my life, why?" "Because I'm about to ask you to do something that might kill you." He stood moving to a weapons locker she hadn't noticed before. "But if we don't try, Kane will take you back, and this time, they won't just build walls in your mind. They'll cut it apart piece by piece to figure out how your telepathy works." "What do you need me to do?" "Piano." Riven pulled out 2 pulse rifles, checking their charge levels with practiced efficiency. "I need you to reach out. Use whatever abilities are coming back. Try to sense their crew, their formation, anything that might give us an edge." "Riven, I barely managed to predict your training moves." "I can't." 3 minutes to weapons range," Z3N interrupted. "Kaela." Riven moved to her, placing both hands on her shoulders. "I've seen what you can do. Yesterday in the training bay, you weren't just predicting my moves. You were reading my intentions before I'd fully formed them. That's not muscle memory. That's active telepathy. What if I can't control it? What if I make things worse? Then we die fighting instead of dying in chains. I know which one I prefer." The ship shuddered as something impacted their rear shields. A warning shot. 2 minutes, Z3N announced. "They're hailing again." "Put him through," Riven ordered, handing Kaela one of the rifles. "But keep it short." "Dim." Kane's voice returned, dripping with false civility. "Captain Cross, you have exactly 90 seconds to power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. If you comply, I might even let you live long enough to watch what we do to our little Echo blood." Riven keyed the comm with one finger while never taking his eyes off Kaela. "Kane, go to hell." The channel cut, and immediately the tactical display showed incoming missiles. Evasive maneuvers, Riven threw himself into the pilot's seat as the ship bucked and twisted around them. Kaela closed her eyes, trying to push past the fear and reach out with senses she'd thought were dead. At first there was nothing, just the familiar emptiness, that had haunted her for 3 years. Then, like a light switching on in a dark room, she felt them. 12 minds aboard the slaver ship. Most of them were brutal but simple, focused on the immediate task of capture and violence. But there were others, calculating minds, planning boarding strategies, and one presence that felt like ice and razor wire, Kane himself thinking about what he'd do to her once she was back in his custody. "I can feel them," she whispered, and even as she spoke, the sensation grew stronger. 12 crew. "They're planning to disable our engines, then board through the aft airlock." "Where are they concentrating their fire?" Riven asked, the ship spinning through another impossible maneuver. Kaela pushed deeper, fighting through the mental static that tried to block her. "Forward shields. They want to force you to present our stern to them." Z3N reroute power from forward shields to engines. All available energy to the main drive. Riven, that's suicide. One direct hit to the forward sections and do it. The ship's vibration changed as massive amounts of power fed into the drive systems. On the tactical display, their velocity began to climb rapidly. "What are you doing?" Kaela asked. "Something stupid." Riven's hands moved over the controls with desperate precision. But stupidity sometimes works when the other guy expects you to be smart. The slaver ship fired again, multiple missile salvos converging on their position. Riven threw the Valkyrian into a spiraling dive toward the nearest asteroid, using the massive rock as a shield. 30 seconds until they have a clear shot, Z3N warned. "Kaela, I need more. Can you tell me what Kane is thinking? What his next move will be?" She reached out again, this time focusing specifically on the ice-cold mind commanding the slaver vessel. What she found there made her gasp. "He's not trying to capture the ship," she said, horror creeping into her voice. "He's going to destroy it. He has a neural extraction device. He only needs my brain intact." Riven's face went pale. "Son of a bitch. Z3N, change of plans. Cut engines. All power to shields." "Riven, what?" "Dead ship protocol. We're going to play dead and hope he gets careless enough to come in close." The Valkyrian's engines died, and suddenly they were just another piece of debris tumbling through the asteroid field. Emergency lighting dimmed to almost nothing. Life support dropped to minimum levels. "I'm reading his intentions," Kaela whispered, her telepathic abilities growing stronger as adrenaline and desperation fed them. "He's suspicious, but he's coming closer. He wants to scan for life signs before he blows us apart." Through the viewports, they could see the slaver ship approaching, weapons powered, but not immediately firing. It was larger than the Valkyrian, more heavily armed, and absolutely confident in its superiority. "Range?" Riven asked quietly. 500 meters and closing," Z3N replied. "Kaela, when I say go, I need you to find their weapons officer and scramble his targeting systems. Can you do that?" I don't know. I've never tried to affect someone's mind directly." "You don't have to control them, just confuse them for a few seconds." The slaver ship was close enough now that they could see figures moving behind the viewports. Kane's voice came over the comm again. "Clever, Captain Cross, but not clever enough. Preparing to board." 300 meters, Z3N whispered. 250. 200. Riven's hand hovered over the engine restart. "Kaela." She reached out with everything she had, feeling her way toward the mind controlling the slaver ship's weapons. When she found him, she pushed, not trying to control, but simply to overwhelm him with static confusion, conflicting signals. "Now!" Riven shouted. The Valkyrian's engine screamed to life, hurling them directly at the slaver ship's broadside. At the same instant, Riven fired everything they had: missiles, pulse cannons, even the emergency flares. The slaver ship, caught completely off guard by the sudden acceleration and confused by their weapons officer's temporary incapacitation, tried to turn away. But they were too close, moving too fast. The Valkyrian's missile barrage tore into their port side, ripping through armor plating and sending secondary explosions rippling along their hull. The larger ship's staggered atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. "Direct hit," Z3N announced with something approaching excitement. "Their weapon systems are offline. Main drive is damaged." But Kaela could feel something else through her telepathic link. Rage. Absolute murderous rage from Kane's mind, and beneath it, a cold determination that made her blood freeze. "Riven," she said urgently, "he's not done. He's activating something. Some kind of backup system." On the tactical display, energy readings from the slaver ship suddenly spiked. Emergency power core, Riven realized. He's going to overload his reactor. Take us both out rather than let you escape. The damaged slaver ship was turning towards them, limping but determined. Through her telepathic connection, Kaela could feel Kane's twisted satisfaction. If he couldn't have her, no one could. Z3N maximum acceleration. Get us out of here. Engines at 110%. We're gaining distance, but slowly. Kaela reached out one more time, not toward the slaver ship, but toward Riven. For just a moment, their minds touched, and she shared with him everything she was sensing. The countdown timer in Kane's head, the sheer destructive force building in the slaver ship's core, the love and determination in Riven's mind as he pushed their ship beyond its safety limits to save her. Understanding passed between them without words. They weren't going to make it. Not unless someone did something desperate. There's another way, Kaela said quietly. No, Riven said immediately, somehow knowing what she was thinking. I can overload his mind, force him to lose consciousness before he can complete the overload sequence. Kaela, you said yourself you don't know how to control other people's minds. I don't, but I know how to break them. The truth hung between them like a blade. She could stop Kane, but the kind of telepathic assault required would likely burn out her newly recovered abilities permanently. She'd save them but lose herself in the process, just like her people had done, sacrificing everything to save others. Riven looked at her and she saw the exact moment he made his choice. Do it, he said. Kaela closed her eyes, gathered every scrap of telepathic power she possessed and struck. The scream that echoed across the comm channels was barely human. The silence that followed Kane's scream was more terrifying than the battle had been. Kaela collapsed to the deck, blood trickling from her nose, her entire body shaking from the psychic backlash. The telepathic assault had been like grabbing a live power cable with her bare mind, destructive to both target and wielder. But it had worked. On the tactical display, the slaver ship was drifting its energy, readings dropping to normal levels. The reactor overload had been aborted. Kaela, Riven was out of his chair in an instant, dropping to his knees beside her. Talk to me, are you conscious? She tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Her head felt like someone had detonated a small explosive inside her skull, but she was alive. They were all alive. Scanning, Z3N announced. The slaver vessel is dead in space. Life signs are minimal but present. It appears Captain Kane and most of his crew are unconscious but breathing. What about their ship's systems? Riven asked, helping Kaela sit up against the bulkhead. Disabled across the board. Whatever Kaela did to their captain seems to have created a neural feedback loop that affected their entire computer network. They're not going anywhere. Kaela finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Did I kill him? No, Z3N replied with something that might have been reassurance, though I suspect he'll have quite the headache when he wakes up. His crew as well. Apparently telepathic shockwaves don't discriminate. Riven gently wiped the blood from her face with his sleeve. Mitayamu. How do you feel? I mean, apart from the obvious. Kaela took mental inventory. The crushing headache was already beginning to fade, and the nausea was manageable. But something else was different. Something profound. I can still feel them, she said with growing wonder. The crew on that ship, their dreams, their nightmares. It's not gone, Riven. My telepathy isn't burned out. It's stronger, Z3N observed. Much stronger. The psychic stress appears to have completed the healing process rather than damaging it. The remaining neural blocks have been completely dissolved. So you're a full telepath again, Riven confirmed, and his smile was brighter than the stars outside their viewports. Maybe even stronger than you were before. Kaela closed her eyes and reached out, not in desperation this time, but with curious confidence. She could sense Riven's mind nearby, warm, protective, filled with relief and something deeper that made her heart skip. Z3N's artificial consciousness was like a crystalline structure, complex and beautiful in ways that organic minds weren't. Beyond them, she could feel the unconscious slavers drifting in their damaged ship. And further out, much further, other minds scattered across the system. Traders, colonists, pirates who were suddenly very nervous about the massive energy discharge they detected. This is going to take some getting used to, she murmured. We'll figure it out together, Riven said. But first let's deal with our immediate problem. He helped her to her feet, and together they looked at the tactical display showing the disabled slaver ship. What do we do with them? Kaela asked. Normally I'd call system security and let them handle it. But Kane has connections, money, influence. He'd probably be back on the streets within a standard month. Kaela could feel what Riven was thinking, the grim calculations running through his mind. She also sensed his reluctance to voice what he considered the most practical solution. You're thinking about spacing them, she said quietly. It would solve the problem permanently and make you a murderer. Riven's jaw tightened. Kaela, these aren't misguided criminals. They're slavers. They've destroyed thousands of lives. They were going to dissect your brain for profit. I know. She touched his arm gently. But killing unconscious enemies isn't who you are. It's not who we are. Then what do you suggest? Kaela looked at the slaver ship again, an idea beginning to form. Z3N, are their navigation computers still functional? Partially. Why? Can you access them remotely? Program a course. With some effort, yes. What did you have in mind? There's a prison planet in the Cerberus system. Maximum security. The kind of place where slaver captains don't buy their way out. She paused, considering. We program their ship to autopilot there. By the time they wake up, they'll be in custody. Riven studied her face. That's assuming they survive the trip. Their life support is damaged. Then we patch it, just enough to keep them alive until they reach Cerberus. Well, you want to save the lives of people who would have tortured you to death. Kaela was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision. Through her restored telepathy, she could sense echoes of Kane's memories. The slaves he'd broken, the families he'd destroyed, the casual cruelty that had defined his entire adult life. Yes, she said finally, because the alternative is becoming like them, and I refuse to let them turn me into something I'm not. Riven looked at her for a long time, and she could feel the conflict in his mind. The part of him that had been shaped by years of violence wanted simple final justice. But the part that had chosen to save her, the part that believed in second chances, understood what she was trying to say. All right, he said at last. We do it your way. Z3Ns, I'll need approximately 2 hours to jury-rig their life support and program the navigation systems. The irony of saving slavers to send them to prison is not lost on me, by the way. As Z3N began the complex process of remotely repairing their enemy's ship, and Kaela made their way to the mess hall. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving them both exhausted. Real question, Riven said, as they settled at the table with cups of that excellent coffee. What happens now? Kane was right about one thing. You're probably the most valuable person in the galaxy. There will be others looking for you. Kaela considered this, sipping her coffee and enjoying the simple pleasure of making choices about her own life. Then we make sure they don't find me, or if they do that, they regret it. I'm crew. Remember you said so yourself. That was before I knew you were powerful enough to shut down an entire ship with your mind. Does that change things? Riven was quiet for a moment, and through their growing mental connection, she could feel him working through the implications. Her abilities made her valuable, yes, but they also made her dangerous to the kind of people who trafficked in sentient lives. It makes things more complicated, he admitted. But no, it doesn't change the fundamental equation. You're still you, I'm still me, and there are still people out there who need help. So we keep taking the jobs nobody else will touch, if that's what you want. Kaela smiled, and for the first time since her capture 3 years ago, she felt truly free. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. She had her abilities back, her strength back, and most importantly, she had people who cared about her. I want to help, she said. People like I was. People who have given up hope. Then that's what we'll do. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the gentle hum of the ship around them and the occasional update from Z3N about the slaver vessel repairs. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly past as the Valkyrian continued toward Bastion Outpost. Riven, Kaela said eventually, thank you for buying me, for believing in me, for giving me the chance to become who I was supposed to be. Thank you for not letting me become someone I didn't want to be. Through her telepathy, she could feel the truth of his words, the temptation to choose violence over justice, the easy path of revenge over the harder road of maintaining principles under pressure. "We're good for each other," she observed. "Yeah, we are," Ibira. "Life support repairs complete," Z3N announced. "Navigation course programmed. The slaver vessel will reach Cerberus in approximately 18 standard days." Kane and his crew, still unconscious but stable. "I've also taken the liberty of transmitting their complete slave trading records to Cerberus security. They'll be expecting some very specific charges to be filed." Kaela felt a grim satisfaction at that news. Justice might be delayed, but it wouldn't be denied. "Set course for Bastion Outpost," Riven ordered. "We have a delivery to make." As the Valkyrian jumped to hyperspace, leaving the day-old slaver ship behind, Kaela felt something she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation for the future. Not fear of what might happen, but excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead. She was no longer property, no longer a victim, no longer broken. She was Kaela, crew member of the Valkyrian, last of the Aetherians, and someone who had chosen mercy over vengeance. She was free, and tomorrow she would help someone else find their own freedom. The question was, who would they save next? 3 days later, Kaela stood in the cargo bay of the Valkyrian, holding something she'd never owned before: a personal vibroknife. Not a weapon for combat, though it could serve that purpose if needed. This was a tool for creation, for making something permanent. "You sure about this?" Riven asked from the doorway. He'd been watching her prepare for the past hour, understanding the significance of what she was about to do without needing telepathy to figure it out. "I've never been more sure of anything." She activated the blade and carefully began to etch into the bulkhead near her quarters. The metal resisted at first, then yielded to the precise tool, curling away in tiny spirals that caught the light. Letter by letter, she carved her story into the ship that had become her home. Kaela, Valkyrian crew, not property. When she finished, she stepped back to admire her work. The letters were simple, unadorned, but they might as well have been written in starfire for how much they meant to her. "Trin logged this in the ship's records," she said. "Identity confirmed and logged," the AI replied, and there was something almost ceremonial in its tone. "Kaela of the Aetherians, crew member of the Valkyrian, status-free citizen of the galaxy." "Welcome aboard," Riven said, and when she turned to look at him, his smile held more warmth than a small sun. "Officially." They made their way to the bridge where the forwarded viewports showed the growing bulk of Bastion Outpost. It was a massive space station built into an asteroid and expanded over decades into a sprawling hub of legitimate commerce. The kind of place where you could disappear if you needed to, or find work if you were willing to take risks. "So," Kaela said, settling into what had become her usual spot at the navigation console, "what's our next job?" "Funny you should ask." Riven brought up a holographic display showing their message queue. 3 offers came in while we were dealing with Kane. Let's see what the universe has for us. The first message was from a mining consortium on the Rim. Standard cargo run, decent pay, minimal risk. The kind of job that paid the bills but didn't change anyone's life. The second was from a private military contractor. Escort duty for a weapons shipment. High pay, moderate risk, morally questionable. The third made Kaela's breath catch in her throat. "It's from the Underground Railroad," she said, recognizing the coded signature. The railroad was a loosely organized network of people who helped slaves escape their captors and find freedom. They operated in the shadows, always one step ahead of the authorities who wanted to shut them down. "What do they need?" Riven asked. Kaela decoded the message, her fingers moving automatically through the cipher she'd learned during her own brief time as a runaway. "Extraction mission. 37 slaves being held on a processing station in the Omega sector. Mixed species, all scheduled for neural conditioning in 72 hours. Neural conditioning, the same process that had been used on her. The systematic destruction of personality and free will that turned people into empty shells. 72 hours, Riven mused. That's cutting it close even for us. The station is heavily guarded, Kaela continued reading. Multiple escort ships, automated defense systems. The railroad has tried twice to get people out. Both missions failed. What makes them think we can succeed where they failed? Kaela looked up from the message, and Riven could see the answer in her eyes before she spoke. Because I can get inside their heads. All of them. I can make the guards see things that aren't there, miss things that are right in front of them. I can turn their own minds against them. That's assuming your telepathy works on a large scale. You've only tested it in combat situations. Then it's time to find out what I'm really capable of. Riven studied the mission parameters and she could feel his mind working through the tactical challenges. It was a nightmare scenario from a military perspective. Too many variables, too many ways for things to go wrong, insufficient intelligence about the target. It was also exactly the kind of mission that the old Riven, the one who'd lost faith in the galaxy's capacity for good, would have rejected without a second thought. The pay isn't great, he said finally. It's not about the money. The risk is enormous. So are the stakes. If we fail, we'll probably end up in chains ourselves. And if we succeed, 37 people get to carve their own names somewhere, instead of being reduced to inventory numbers. Riven was quiet for a long moment, and through their growing mental connection, Kaela could feel the exact moment when he made his decision. It wasn't about tactical advantages or risk assessment. It was about the kind of people they chose to be. Z3N sent a reply to the railroad. Tell them we'll take the job. Riven, the AAA said with what sounded like exasperation. I feel compelled to point out that this mission has a projected survival rate of approximately 12%. What's life without a little excitement? Less likely to end in a violent, painful death. Z3N set course for the Omega sector, maximum speed. As the Valkyrian turned away from Bastion Outpost and accelerated toward their new destination, Kaela felt a familiar sensation. Not the cold fear that had defined so much of her life, but the warm anticipation that came from having a purpose larger than survival. Nervous, Riven asked. Excited, she replied, and realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I get to be the one who saves people instead of the one who needs saving. Just remember we're a team. You don't have to carry this alone. I know, that's what makes it possible. They settled into comfortable silence as the ship carried them toward their next adventure. Outside the viewports, stars streaked past like trails of hope painted across the darkness. Riven, Kaela said eventually, whatever happens next, thank you. For showing me that freedom isn't just about not being in chains. It's about having the power to choose who you want to be. Thank you for reminding me that some choices are worth making even when they're dangerous. We're going to save them all, aren't we? Riven looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the same determination that had driven him to spend 2,000 credits on a broken slave in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. Every last one of them. As the Valkyrian disappeared into hyperspace carrying its crew toward a rescue mission that would either save 37 lives or end 3. One thing was certain, Kaela was no longer the last of anything. She was the first of something new. The beginning of a story that would span the stars and touch countless lives. She was free. She was strong. She was exactly who she was meant to be. And tomorrow she would help others discover the same truth about themselves. The galaxy was full of people in chains waiting for someone to remind them that they were worth saving. Kaela and Riven were going to be those someones. One rescue at a time, one choice at a time, one name carved into metal at a time. Because in the end, that's what humanity does best. We save each other. We choose hope over despair. We carve our names into the universe and refuse to be forgotten. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we inspire others to do the same. If this story moved you, if you believe in second chances and the power of choosing hope over despair, let us know in the comments below. Share your thoughts about redemption, about the choices that define us, about the moments when strangers become family. And if you want to hear more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about the strength that comes from refusing to give up on each other, make sure to subscribe, because the galaxy is full of heroes waiting to be discovered, including perhaps you.